Good afternoon, everybody. In this session, I'm going to talk about the EudraVigilance access policy and its implementation, which can also be seen as the access to EudraVigilance data. So I understood this topic was already mentioned and discussed at the previous stakeholder meeting back in June. And the aim of this presentation is to give you more input, more information on the implementation of this access policy. It might not be on the full implementation, but at least on part of it. Can I have the next slide, please? So we'll have a short introduction. After that, we'll look at an overview of this access policy to explain the goals and who's going to access what and how. We'll look at the timelines. After that, we'll look at the implementation itself. So it will not be on the full access policy, but on a specific part. We'll have a little discussion about data quality, which is quite important when you start publishing data from EudraVigilance. And finally, I will show you what we call the dashboard, which is just a set of reports to access those data. Next slide, please. So as an introduction, this is just the timelines of the EudraVigilance access policy. So the first draft was drafted in December 2007 and was published in July this year. It can seem like a long timeline for the publication of this access policy, but we had a lot of challenges to face, and I will explain a bit later on in the coming slides. Next slide, please. So first, let's look at the goals of the access policy. So one of the first goals is to improve public health by facilitating the safety monitoring of medicinal products during clinical trials and following their marketing authorization. The second goal is to support signal detection activities in the context of spontaneous reporting for authorized medicine. The third goal is to inform healthcare professionals and the general public by publishing adverse reaction data related to spontaneous report for authorized medicine. And the last goal of this access policy is to allow for the use of adverse reaction data for research purposes. Next slide, please. So during the public consultation, the EMA assessed all the comments that were received. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges was to get the right balance between disclosure of information and the data protection element. So we have to take into account the European Ombudsman and Data Protection Supervisor recommendation to finalize this access policy. And so what the aim is to allow proactive disclosure of information, so maximum data are released proactively. The need of the public and the requirement of personal data protection are met. To achieve this, we assessed and categorized all the data elements of a safety message to ensure the full compliance with the EU data protection legislation. And what the access policy also does is to define a set of stakeholder groups, and with those groups, different access levels to the safety information. So there is two different levels of access, one which is full access, so the group can see all the information from a safety report, and a defined set, and access to a defined set of data fields. Next slide, please. So those are the four stakeholder groups defined in the access policy. So the group one is made of the European Medicine Regulatory Authorities, the European Commission, and the agency. The group two is made of healthcare professionals and the general public. The third group is for marketing authorization holders and sponsors. And the last one is for research organization. Next slide, please. So this slide summarizes the different stakeholder groups, what they will access to, and how they will access those data. So if you look at the top of the table for national competent authorities, European Commission, and EMEA, that specific stakeholder group will access all the data feed from the safety report. So they will have access to all the information. If we now look at the next stakeholder group made of MAH and sponsors, they will have access to all the data fields if they are the sender of that specific safety information. If they're not the sender of that specific safety information, they will have access to a defined set of data elements, which are defined in the access policy document. Research organization, the next stakeholder group, will have access to define a data feed. And if you look at the last one, the healthcare professionals and general public, they will also have access to a defined set of data feed. So you can see that most of the stakeholder groups have access to the same data element. Now, if we look at how those different stakeholder groups will access the data, so for the group NCA, European Commission, EMA, MH and sponsors and research organization, those three stakeholder groups will have access to what we call the data warehouse. So, and this data warehouse allow these stakeholder groups to use the signal detection and data analysis functionalities. So that's specific for those three stakeholder groups. If we look at the healthcare professionals and general public, that stakeholder group will have access to those reports I was talking about before, that we call dashboard, that will be published on the website. So those reports will be publicly available, and the report published on the website would be aggregated data. Next slide, please. So now in terms, that's done for the overview. Now in terms of timelines. So in conjunction with the implementation of the new pharmacovigilance legislation, the EMA Management Board adopted in March 2011 a stepwise approach made of two steps. So the first step is for healthcare professionals and the general public. The second one is for marketing authorization holders, sponsors, and research organizations. So if we look now at healthcare professionals and the general public, the first, so it's made of two phases. The first phase, phase one, consists in a publication of aggregated data for centrally authorized products, and those data will be updated on a monthly basis. And we are aiming at the implementation of this phase one by the end of the year. So end of the year or January 2012. So phase two consists in the publication of aggregated data for medicinal products, so not only for centrally authorized products, updated on a monthly basis, and access to the defined set of data elements I was mentioning previously. And it's foreseen to be implemented by the end of 2012. I can just say a short word on the step two, which is the implementation for marketing authorization holders, sponsors, and research organizations, who will have access to the data warehouse. Before access is granted, the system needs to pass an audit, and we also need to implement new ISO standards, so that explain why this timeline is in 2014-2015. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about implementation, and I'm not going to talk about the full implementation, but just the step one and phase one, which is the implementation for healthcare professionals and the general public by publishing of aggregated data for centrally authorized product by the end of the year. So the following slides are specifically for that part of the implementation. So what we did, we established what we call the EV user group, with representatives from the patient and consumer working parties and healthcare professionals organization working group to discuss the implementation aspects, such as format and content of the report, development of explanation on pharmacovigilance and EudraVigilance, draft guidance on nature and interpretation of adverse reaction data, and to develop clear instruction for consumers and patients. So we had our first meeting back in October last year to discuss how EU and non-EU regulators approach the publication of adverse reaction data. Next slide, please. Thank you. During that meeting last year, we, as I said, looked at a few examples, and one of the nicest examples was from Health Canada. So just to summarize how health Canada implementation compared to the EMA implementation. So if you go on the Health Canada website, you can have a look at the safety information, and the user has to specify some criteria to do the search. So for example, in Health Canada implementation, you can select on a specific time frame. The proposal for the EMA is not to give that opportunity to the user. So the report will contain all the data from the setup of EudraVigilance up to when the report was run, which will be on the monthly basis. If we look at the second topic, which is patient search criteria, you can see that in Health Canada, you can select the gender, the report outcome, the age. In our implementation, the user will not have to select any of those criteria. All those data will be included in the report itself. Next slide, please. If now we looked at the third point, which is a suspect health product or search criteria. In Health Canada implementation, you can select a drug or substance, and that will be the same in our implementation. So the user will have to select either one brand name or one substance name. If you look at the last search criteria, which is the adverse reaction term search criteria, the user can select either the adverse reaction term or the system organ class. In the EMA implementation, the user does not have to select any of those fields. Those criteria will be in the output, in the report itself. I will show you later on how. Next slide, please. So just to summarize, we felt that it would be easier for the users not to have too many search criteria to enter, just to select the drug and substance, and all the data that the user will require will be inside already those dashboards or those reports. So we looked at what is the best way to provide those data to the user. So you could have a PDF document, you could have Excel document, but we set our eyes on the dashboard, which is provide functionality to combine multiple reports on the same page, which is user-friendly for visualization and navigation, and has a dynamic interface. So we developed a draft dashboard, and we sent that dashboard with questionnaire to the member of the EV user group to get their feedback. So the questionnaire was focused on user-friendliness, layout, level of details, navigation, relevance of available information, etc. So I have to say that the feedback that we received was quite positive, and we took on board some of those comments for the final implementation. Next slide, please. So this is just, for the sake of the presentation, a couple of screenshots of the dashboard. I will show you later on, so we can move to the next slide. So now, before we make those data available, I will have a quick word on the data quality. So in accordance with the decision taken by the head of medicine agency in 2008, the EMA is undertaking work to clean and code the data in EudraVigilance before implementation of the access policy and the release of those data. So we have like 5 work packages. So the first one, they're not all relevant for the access policy, but most of them are. So the first work package concerns the detection and management of duplicate safety messages in EudraVigilance. So the objective is to identify those duplicates and to merge them, so we avoid duplicates. The second work package is about manual recording of medicinal products reported in the safety report. So the objective is to code all the medicinal products to assist signal detection activities. The third work package is the validation and update of the medicinal product that is used in EudraVigilance. So the objective is to have a reliable coding thesaurus. If we look at the fourth work package, we see the review of ICSR quality reported to EudraVigilance. So this has for objective to improve overall data quality of the data submitted to EudraVigilance, and by sending feedback to the reporting organization. The last one, which is the least relevant for the access policy, is the provision of translation of case narrative and medicinal product information. So this is to assist the review of case narrative where an English translation has not been provided. So that's not relevant for now, but that might be in the future. Next slide, please. So we have a framework contract with a third-party company that runs until the mid of 2014. And this table shows some timelines for those 4 work packages. So for the detection and management of duplicate, the work started in December last year. And the aim is to have all the duplicate screened and cleaned by July 2012. For the manual recording of medicinal product, the work also started in December 2010. And all medicinal product information reported in the safety report should be recorded by the end of Q1 2012. Regarding the validation of the medicinal product information, this work has not started yet, and this is also related to the Article 57, which I'm sure you have already discussed. If you look at the last work package, we see the review of ICSR data quality. This has just started back in June this year. And by the end of the year, about 100 standard organizations will be reviewed and contacted with regard to the data quality of the safety report sent to EudraVigilance. Next slide, please. So all this work is done to ensure that the data quality of EudraVigilance data is reach a certain standard, so everybody can use those information. Now we get to the point where I'm going to show you the dashboard demonstration. So I'm going to show you the report part of the step 1, phase 1, which is the publication of aggregated data for centrally authorized product that will be freely available on a website. For this, I will need to have the mouse, if it's possible. So if you excuse me. So on the website that is not yet set up, but we will start very soon. So there will be a guidance available explaining what is EudraVigilance, how to interpret the data, and all the information necessary. And the user will have the choice to select either a substance or a product for centrally authorized product. So all the centrally authorized product will be listed as well as all substances used in the centrally authorized product. And once the user makes the selection of a specific product or substance, this dashboard will open up based on their selection. So yes, as you can see, this dashboard is made of 4 different tabs that are at the top. So we're going to start with the first tab, which is the number of individual cases. So this specific tab gives an overview of the number of individual cases identified in EudraVigilance for the drug selected by the user up to when the report was run. So this first screen shows you the total number of cases distributed by the geographic origin, whether it's an EA or non-EA case. So you'll have a grid view as well as a graph view. You'll have the number of cases split by sex, as well as the number of cases split by age group. So that's the first view and the less detailed view of the user selection. Now, if we want to get more detail, we can move to the next tab, which is the number of individual cases by reaction group. So in that view, what is listed there is all the system organ class. And for each of the system organ class, we have the distribution by the geographic origin, by sex, by age group, or by reporter group. So the user, as you can see, the user can select the view that you would like to see. And for each view, you will be able to see how many cases are from EA, non-EA, how many are not specified. And as you can see, when I hover on the graph, the number of cases is shown. If the user wants to have the view by sex, he goes to the next tab and see the distribution by sex, same by age group or by reporter group, which is either healthcare professionals or non-healthcare professionals. What you can also do by clicking on that little icon is to move from a graph view to a grid view. So there you got not only you got the grid view with all the numbers. Okay. Now, if we want to and of course, you can go back to the graph view. If we want to get more detail, we can move to the next tab, which shows the number of individual cases for a selected reaction group, which is the selected system organ class. So there on the left-hand side, you got the list of all the system organ class available. And by selecting a given system organ class, those reports will be updated with the correct data. It's not going to work now because I'm not connected, but the user can browse and select, and those reports will be refreshed. So we'll have a distribution by geographic origin, distribution by reporter group, healthcare and healthcare professionals, and a mix of age group and sex. And the same again, we can always have the graph or grid view. Now we can move to the last panel, which is the most detailed. So in this last panel, the user can select a specific system organ class. So based on that selection, the corresponding preferred term belonging to that system organ class will be loaded in that panel. And the user can browse and select a specific reaction, and that will update those reports there. So one of the things that we didn't have previously was the outcome. And following the consultation with the EV user group, we now have added the outcome. So the outcome of the reaction will be available in those dashboards. We have the number of cases by reporter group, and again, age group and sex. So in the final, when you will go live, the layout might be a bit different. Maybe you'll have the age group and sex at the top, but all those reports will be there. So that's what will be published by the end of the year and will be available on the website for everybody. So now in terms of next steps, so the implementation by our ICT colleague is still ongoing. We have now to work on the draft guidance, which we understood is really important. And so if there are some member of the EV user group in the assembly, be prepared because we will circulate that draft guidance for your review and comments. And we're now starting the website design and development to implement and publish those dashboards. So if you have any question, please feel free. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stephen. I have to say, it's been a long time coming, but if it looks as good when it goes live as it looks on your screen, I have to say it's been worth the wait. And watch out, Health Canada. The lady on the left, you might have to ask your question slowly because he's doing his catwalk again with his mouse.
Okay. This is Tamara Lejava from GSK Vaccines, representing IFPIA for the moment. By giving access to public to have access to aggregate reports and then giving opportunity to review spontaneously reported cases, I think it opens up certain risk to have these reports misinterpreted. As we know, spontaneously reported cases, I mean, the interpretation takes some expertise and experience. And despite all the efforts of training even staff who deals with pharmacovigilance, there are still limitations how much it can be interpreted. Based on lessons learned with vaccine safety, public health had a price to pay for having vaccine fear mixed with the true risk. How does agency foresee this policy to support the best public interest, taking into account the strong presence of anti-vaccine campaigns, and giving them access that may open the opportunity to take advantage of this tool?
Very interesting question. Stephen, do you just want to, I know it was in your presentation, but just emphasize the explanatory and the guidance, if you like, the health warnings that people will have to get through before they get to the pretty graphs. And then I'd be really quite interested to get maybe yet a view from a member state perspective, but also a view from some of the patient groups, because there's already ADR data in the public domain if you go to the FDA website, for example. But the issue is a real issue. Stephen, first.
Yes. During the consultation with the EV user group, it was made clear that the guidance is really crucial for this implementation. It needs to be understood, and before, as you said, the general public can access those reports. So we'll make sure that this guidance is self-explanatory and there is no confusion when those data are released. But I think if we want to increase transparency, this was one of the wish of the healthcare professionals and the patient representatives to have access to those data. So, but we understood that the guidance is really a crucial part of this implementation.
So please go ahead, and then I'd be very interested to get additional input from some of the additional patient groups. Please go ahead.
Lisa Murphy from EudraVigilance. I do think actually that society is ready for this, but I do think that the results have to come in context. What we see here is a number of figures, and this has to come in relationship as how the drug is, how many doses or how much of the drug that is about. So we have to have some context. I have another issue. I would very much like the participants in the EudraVigilance working group to comment upon how the comments were taken on board, because I do think that the interface could be still better. It could be more user-friendly, and there are also other aspects that we still are trying to come across. So I would welcome those to
That was a question to the members of the patients and consumers, as well as healthcare professionals that have been more involved in the detailed discussions on this. Is anybody, David, you're looking at me as if you may be implicated. Go for it, sir.
Actually, I agree with some of the concerns you just voiced, and there is no point to put data out in public without any context. You only confuse people. So interpretation is much needed, and also providing understanding of the benefit-risk assessment that has been made by the agency per product. And I think we are challenged here to give this information. This is very, very difficult. Perhaps we need visual aids or electronic aids to make to visualize what the benefits and what the risks are of a medication, so the user, the end user, the patient can get sort of a picture of it, something he can discuss with his healthcare provider. I don't know the answers here, but I think we have a piece of work ahead of us, and need to find tools and electronic tools perhaps to get out of this trap. I mean, we want people to get vaccinated when a vaccine is approved, and I have seen it with H1N1 in my country. We had big problems in hospitals. In hospitals I am working with, to have the nurses take the vaccine. And I thought it was criminal, close to criminal, by the nurses refusing the vaccine because they didn't know the danger when when we were vaccinated, and the fear is real, and I'm really concerned as well.
Please go ahead.
And to follow you, it's also different in different countries how we read information. So I think the national groups have to come into it here in order to interpret it into the environment where it will be read. So it's also different in different age groups. So it's really a thing to be tested and consulted about.
Francois, then maybe Mick Foy, and then Jutta.
Well, in parallel with the vaccination campaign, there was a media campaign, and luckily enough, not all medicinal products have such a media campaign, and we hope that in most cases the environment will be much more calm to help the use of that data. But exactly like for the package leaflet, which requires some interpretation and some understanding, I think the goal, as David says, is not that patients will be at home and thinking, what shall I do today? Or let's visit the EudraVigilance website and see what's in there. In most cases, the context will be that they will be or with a healthcare professional or with a member of an organization, another peer, and visiting the website and discussing what's in there and trying to interpret. I think the cases where a patient will be isolated, accessing the website and having difficulties understanding the information which is there will be limited, but we should certainly improve the website so that if people need to have additional information or other resources to help understanding what's in there, that should be proposed on the same screens, maybe.
Mick, I would be interested in any comment from you, because the UK authority, amongst others, has been publishing ADR data in aggregated form for a number of years, and I think the fears that are being expressed were expressed before you made your data public, and I would be interested to know what has been the response. I know one member state may not culturally be the same as another, but over to you, Mick.
I think our experience has largely been positive. I think this is about transparency and making data available, and if you don't make data available, people tend to think you're hiding something. So I think the more proactive you are in communicating what you've got in your database is a good message to be putting out. There's always going to be the scaremongers who want to make a story out of the data. When you publish data, our experience is you need to caveat it. You need to put the guidance out, how to interpret the data. There's a lot of other information to take into consideration, the number of prescriptions. If there has been a media story, you will get more reports coming in. And these are the sorts of things that you need to put out alongside the information. But our experience has been positive, particularly with vaccines. Remember, in the pandemic, we were publishing on a weekly basis updated information on the number of ADRs we received through the pandemic and comparing it to what we would expect to see. So that largely staved off a lot of inquiries and a lot of scaremongering, should we say. So I think our experience has been positive, and it is about transparency, and I think it's what we should be doing.
Jutta, I'd be interested in your view as a head of a national agency.
Yes, thank you very much. And maybe it's nearly not as a head, but nearly as Jutta from the Danish Medicines Agency. I will follow very much what you said, Mick, because I think what we sometimes tend to forget is that there is a lot of information out there, and people are getting the information, but they are not getting, they're getting very strange sorts of information. If you go into chat rooms and small clubs on Facebook and if you go and dig into that, you could get really scared. So in some way, I think it would be very helpful if there was some validated data which also was in the public domain. That's the first. The other is that we have, and it will be a challenge to all of us sitting in this room, we have to, so to say, discuss with people, but we do that today, but we have to discuss other issues. And I think at the end of the day, this will not stop questioning. It will just put up other questions, but maybe more, I don't know, more mature questions, if you could put it that way. And we will also have in this, so to say, scientific biased world to also look into ourselves and say that data is not necessarily a proof, and all the reservations about that and that and that. But at the end of the day, data is also a part of information, and we should not neglect that. So I welcome this very much. I know it will be a huge work, but I think it would be much more profitable to use my time on that instead of discussing with strange media people who had digged out an adverse reaction, and now they have shown to the world that these authorities hiding all the diseases. So I know it will be challenging, but I prefer really very much this challenge to the challenges I have today.
You're almost beyond my visit. Is it Ilaria? Ilaria, back to you, because you asked the original question.
Thank you. I just want to echo what my colleagues from the CWP just said. The society is ready. The public has the right to have this information. At the same time, nobody wants people to be scared. So the guidelines are very important. It's important to provide information about the context, additional information on the product. But as a concrete suggestion, we were thinking about a disclaimer, a very visible disclaimer, for example, in the form of a pop-up, indicating that the benefit-risk ratio of the product is still positive or is under evaluation, and also, but I don't know if this is feasible under the freedom of speech and freedom of the press rules, to indicate that there is a risk in disseminating to the general public that information without putting it into the context. I don't know if this is possible, but there should be a warning also for those media people who use this information just to sell more magazines, and this is not what we want. Thank you.
Very interesting suggestion. Sir, please, maybe the last word on this particular issue about concerns on scares.
Thank you very much. Killian Toomey is my name. I'm representing the AGE platform, or AGE platform from Brussels, and my background is I'm a geriatrician. First of all, I fully support the discussion that there should be transparency, but I don't think we should be under any illusion. People will be scared once we provide the information, because if, for example, you take MIMS, which is a document that's used in the UK and Ireland, which provides, or the British National Formulary, whichever, like you would never take any product ever if you were to read what's in them. And the difficulty is, how much information do you provide? And so absolutely the issue of the contextual associated information, I think, is crucial. And the reason I think it should be done is that there's a better chance that it will be better done if it's coordinated the way we're discussing today, because as we all know, people can surf on the net now and find out anything they want about anything. But don't underestimate the fact that people will be scared. They're bound to be scared. And I think the challenge will be to ally this development to its maximum extent with information that will tend to dilute that the fear factor, and inform people in a way that will hopefully address that issue. I mean, I think that's the single greatest challenge. Thank you.
I think the points are very well taken. So this is okay, two last gentlemen, and then we'll close this.
I'm representing gaming in Europe, and we are talking about the way that information can get some discomfort and some fear in the patients, but most of this information is we share that information by the internet. The point I want to raise is because the communication in internet is changing now. There is a phenomenon that is called Web 2.0 that is about the social networks, and maybe it's a different kind of communication where people can have some interaction between each other. I think maybe it's early because this is a serious matter, but even the agencies should start to think about this, because this is the way the internet is moving toward this direction. Thank you.
Sir.
From the discussion, I get the impression that the patients of the future...
Just your organization, I'm struggling to see.
I am Erik Bries with Europa WOMO, the Prostate Cancer Alliance. I'm under the impression that in the future the patients will get their drugs and prescriptions straight from the internet. And I feel that the most important source of information should be the prescribing physician, the doctor. And I know that in reality, this tool is very important, but the patient who needs a medication, who has a serious disease, he will speak with his doctor, I hope. And maybe afterwards, when he has read the last line of his package leaflet, might turn to the internet, but he's already taken the drug because he wants to be cured. He does not want to be sick from reading anywhere.
I'm feeling very, very indulgent. So the very last word goes to you on the left, please.
I just want you to make you aware that with vaccines, okay, we talk about patients and healthcare providers, but with vaccines, we need to think about mothers taking healthy infants to vaccinate. So the perception and the bar is pretty high with vaccines. And we've seen situations when single death reports affected vaccination coverage. Thank you.
So we have 2 or 3 more minutes if anybody wants to raise an issue relating to access to this sort of information, which is not on the scare part of which we've had quite a good discussion, I think is very useful. So maybe a colleague at the back and then David Airy.
Again, Grola from Novo Nordisk. I just wanted to make sure the reports we are looking on, are they everything from EV human or everything spontaneously? Because I think at least the source makes a difference. Because I can hear from the discussion that people are kind of anticipating that what we're looking at is suspected adverse reactions. So whether it's from a registry or is that?
No, the cases that will be made available are only spontaneous and serious cases for the time being. So only spontaneous cases will go into those reports, nothing else.
And the very last word then, David, you lucky man, over to you, and then we get coffee.
David Harry, European AIDS Treatment Group. I would like to stress one thing to close. We wanted this information to be out in public. And we have been fighting for this for many, many years. And we want it to be out in the best possible and most understandable way. And we have to collaborate all to make this happening. Thank you.